What advice would you have for young producers that are wanting to maybe come back to agriculture, or they're making a decision about what their future holds?
Well, I think you have to love our way of life to do it. You can't expect schedules. You just kind of have to roll with it, have a plan A, B, C, D, E, and F for each day. And you're not going to have vacations just when you feel like it. At least that's not the way we rolled anyway.
That's one thing I would kind of recommend to someone that's getting started. Don't go overboard on starting out, because maybe there'll be something you're going to want to change a little bit anyhow, and if you go too big, you got a big expense that's already there, and maybe you shouldn't have had it.
My biggest concern was not to get in debt, too deep in debt, so you could get out of, if you got in real deep, there was a ton of them went under at that time in the early 80s. And well, I was kind of hanging in there too, but you don't want to get too deep in debt. That's the big thing I kind of went by,
The biggest challenge I see for them is it's inflation right now. And in 1980, the interest rates hit 20%, and we paid up to 19% interest, and it killed us. So it's probably want to keep your finances under control there a little bit, and not get in too deep, and try and lock in long-term interest rates and that kind of stuff.
I mean, I always think it's really incredible, all the producers that did make it through the 80s, because there was a lot that weren't able to.
There was a lot of them that went out, yes. They sure did. We had a lot of neighbors that are not there anymore. Some of them hung on for a few years and then still went under, and that was a sad thing, to see. You hate to see that.
It's good when you have a good one, and when you have a bad one, well, you just had to forget that and go on to the next one. So
Short-term memory is important in agriculture.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You should learn your lesson and then move on. Make your adjustments and go on with it and everything.
You can't worry about those bad years. You got to think about the good ones that are coming.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Listen, observe older people doing things too. Plus, times have changed, and we've got to accept that and go ahead with it. But at the same time, don't forget, Dad helped you get where you are in the first place. But that's number one. Don't be afraid to check into things at least.
I would say technology is the biggest change I've seen in my lifetime, and how it's changed our way of farming, even cattle and everything. The technology has made it a lot different than it was when I started. Well, of course, the computer, I would say, would be the biggest thing, and of course that's included in everything we do or use nowadays.
Well, yeah, there's been so many changes. I remember the thing that I probably, with the new technology, well, it wouldn't be new technology, but when you used to harvest, you'd fill your truck, then you had to roll out or pull your tarp back and crawl up on top and get that tarp square on the load, and then get off and tie it down. Then they came out with this roll top tarp. That's the thing that I think I enjoyed most of all of the new technology.
I love it.
So
I love
simple. And yet it took that long. I think it was back in probably late 70s before they came out with that roll tarp. And it was just so nice. You could get out and roll it up. And so much easier. I think that I enjoyed that more than anything.
Probably was, we used to summer fallow half, and I got sandy soil up there, and I did get an undercutter before I retired because of the blowing. Now it's double cropped, you don't have the blowing. I think that's real positive. Having said that, I think we use a lot of chemical. Do we use too much? So there's a plus and a minus there. But basically keeping the land from blowing, I think, was huge.
Going from summer fallowing where we were depleting everything in our soils to now where we're continuous cropping and using cover crops and different things to build the soil back up. And from what I understand, that came about by the improvements in chemicals and fertilizer, and now we're doing the precision farming where we're, you know, treating the different soils the way they need to be treated to produce the most.
Summer following to no-till, seeding wheat and barley and oats. That probably stuck in my mind the most, and then the real advance in it that I've noticed, which I'm one of the crookedest drivers in the county I know when it comes to go down a field, is the what do you call it, on the GPS systems on tractors and equipment, and then also the other equipment where you can have equipment that'll tell you if your shafts are turning on what you're using at combine or drills. I couldn't pinpoint a year, I don't think, but one of the things I remember is I have relatives in South Dakota that were actually doing no-till before there was any even started in this area. And they were getting their equipment from Beach at that dealer up there. And that's when I started kind of watching it, and then it slowly moved in here, but I still didn't take a hold of it right away. But then I gradually did, and it definitely changed things for me. I mean, one of the things that really struck me was increasing the bushels per acre that you put on when you were seeding, because you went with more fertilizer, and it took a while for that to soak in up here.
Well, there was a lot of that land that should have never been broke up in the first place, and putting it back to grass is a good thing.
I think that calving has always been my favorite time of the year. I really, really enjoy it. There's no thrill like finding that calf, or especially a set of twins that are up and doing good. Working with Ross and Marissa has been a real blessing because we work together without a lot of talking or a lot of interaction. We just know what the other person is going to do or what is expected out of the other person. And because I don't know if I can explain how it is for me to work with Ross, and then Ross's daughter, and our connection is a real gift.
During calving season, when she would come home from work, she helped me. Anyway, I went out there one time, and there was a cow and a calf. And of course I had a cattle dog, and it was right behind me. And anyway, this cow was a gentle cow, but with the dog behind, she just had her calf. So anyway, I go over there to tag the calf and stuff, and this cow takes me. So, and I mean, it's just rolling me all over the place, and I hear her hollering, shoo, shoo.
Well, I didn't have a stick or anything. I didn't expect this.
But I had to laugh. I mean, it wasn't funny, because it tore my ear down a ways, but I had to laugh because I could hear her saying, shoo, shoo.
Well, one of the things that happened with them that I thought was kind of interesting is I went out in the pasture one day, and there was a young cow calving, and the calf was stuck at the hips. And I was going to sneak up on her and help her, you know, and she got up, and there was a creek there, and she swam across the creek. The calf disappeared under the water, and she came out the other side, and then she dropped the calf on the other side, and the calf was still okay. So, so that was kind of unusual.
We got married. My wife, she lived in town. She didn't even have a driver's license. Having her help me out in the wide open pasture checking cattle, here's a cow having trouble calving. And I hooked onto the equipment that I had in the pickup, which wasn't right for calving in the first place, but we fastened it on front legs, and then I had my wife backing a four-wheel drive pickup up and pulling the calf. And I should have turned her around so she couldn't see what she was doing, is what I should have done. But we got it done, but I wouldn't want to try it by myself. Too bad, you know, it's got to be pretty serious. She didn't even argue. She was ready to help. That's good.
I have a favorite harvest story. I was driving the combine, and Marissa was making her maiden run with the grain cart. And that was about the most exciting thing I've ever experienced. And to this day, whether it's my opinion or Ross's, she is the best grain cart driver we've ever worked with. It's just a natural, you know, it's, some of us have certain gifts and some of us have others. And that's the secret to everything, is pay attention, yes.
Because I worked part of the time with the neighbors. We run 3 machines. He had 2 and I had 1, and they were all the same. And we would park those at night, side by side, so that his hired man would come along with a service pickup and fuel up all 3 combines. The one morning we got there, and the guy in the middle, which was pretty much the boss, he said, "Hey guys, come over here." He was up on top of his combine in the engine compartment. So we went over there, and here, after we'd parked those combines that night, his had caught fire in the engine compartment. And it burned the radiator hose off, and that sprayed and put the fire out. We could have lost 3 combines there, so simple. But after that, we learned, you spread them out, don't put them so close together. That's one thing that really sticks in my mind, is serious. And the other is stupid on my part. We were combining it, and it really sticks in my mind. It was 11 o'clock at night, I come down the field, it was windy, and we were picking up windrows at the time. And my machine, I was in the middle or in front, well, somehow. And I got down to the end of the field, and I turned to come back, and the straw from the other machine was coming right at me. And it was a little hard to see, and I catch myself this late at night, sitting there going in the cab with the dust going by on the outside. I'd had enough for that day. It was time to part.
Community coming together, we've got a little church up there, which I keep thinking, are we gonna keep going? It's the last country church in Adams County. And the people basically at the little church really come together well to keep it going, you know. And now we're in the process of putting siding and windows in. And we put steel on, and Jordan had a telehandler. Otherwise, we probably never got the steel on, but we really come together good for that, you know. And if you need help, you know, there's always somebody gonna help.
Well, we have to tell the Howard and Bob story. Howard's next, he says, the electrician, the REA people came up to shut the power off because they couldn't do that. And he comes and he looks up and he says, "What are you 2 old guys doing up there?" And Howard says, "Well, we got 150 years experience." They're up taking the shingles off and stuff. So. But now we got the siding and the windows to put in, but let's pull together and get it done.
Well, of course, the latest one would be Mitch Miller, and that was great that everybody went and helped him. And we had some other cases like that earlier. And then one of the things that I thought was great is when, after some of the bad storms, people in town, there was a lot of elderly people that couldn't get around, couldn't get their food, you know, and people with snowmobiles went to the grocery store and got stuff for it, took it to them and helped them out that way, and whatever they needed, you know. And everybody really worked together as best they could, you know. And we didn't have any looting or anything like that, like they have in the big cities. People helped each other rather than take advantage of the situation. Well, it's kind of like being married, you know. Sometimes you drive each other crazy, but in the end you pull together.
One thing that sticks in my mind, I wasn't old enough to be helping or driving at the time, but I was there. Our neighbors were hauling in hay in the fall, and spark from the tractor ignited a bunch of it and burned down a bunch of hay and his barn. Well, the fire department from, I don't know if Hettinger was involved, but the Reeder Fire Department was. And they got in there and they got everything, saved what they could for hay, busted through with some loaders and pushed the hay back. And then when the fire was all out and everything soaked down, the neighbors all went home, got their trucks and come back, and everything was completely cleaned up, scraped up and loaded. And it was after dark, but I'm not sure what time. Our dads had that whole area cleaned up and ready for the new building to be set up. that kind of sticks in my mind over the years, how they helped one another. You know, we had a fire one time and people came and helped us put it out too. And it's surprising when there's someone's in a bind how people show up from all over. And I'm glad it's that way.
What are one of the worst storms that you've been through?
Well, in my career, we've had 4 really bad storms where most anything that was outside was dead. You know, 64 was the worst one, and 66 was very, very bad. And we was lucky in them storms. We had everything inside, but in 64 we lost one cow that walked away from the bunch, and she froze her leg way up to her hip, so we had to destroy her. But the rest of them stayed in the barn and close there, and so they was all right. But
December 14th and 15th, 1964.
Okay.
It was a beautiful morning. There was huge snowflakes falling down and just picture perfect. We had to come into town because there was a school land leasing, and you either go that day or you don't. So we went into town, everything seemed fine, and then gradually the wind started coming up, and we had loaded the pickup was loaded with feed, and I remember buying a 50-pound bag of potatoes that got thrown on top of that load. And by the time we started heading home, highway was okay. We got to Bucyrus, turned north, and we could barely see the road. So we found our way home by him driving and me telling him which mailbox we went by. And that's how we got home. And then I don't remember all the details of what happened that day, but I think he must have gone out and done some things, but the next morning he tried to go out and he couldn't. And luckily he found his way back to the house. And at that time I never realized how dangerous it was or what position we were in. The following morning when things calmed down, he went out, and there was at least one milk cow dead in the stanchion. The few calves we had in the yard were still there. Not so sure what shape they were in, but all our cattle were gone. And because of the storm and the hard drifts and all that, they just drifted away with the storm. And we had borrowed money to buy those cows, but later that next spring we borrowed more money and bought more cows, started again. And then there too, we'd only lived on the place 3 years at that time. So we didn't have trees, we didn't have protection. It was a new homestead that had a house and a barn when we first moved there. By the time the storm came, we did have a few corrals and a few other things, but no trees to speak of. So I guess if I had to say what I was most proud of my farm is the trees.
Well, it has to be blizzards. So you get stranded out there, and we only had 1.5 miles to the road, but that was really...
The worst storm, I don't know, was 64, 66, and I was looking at the packing plant. I wasn't farming then. It got so cold that the cows froze sitting up. They were just sitting, we got some pictures, they were just sitting and froze. You know how they sit down and freeze feet? They were just froze.
They suffocated is what happened.
Yeah, that was the worst storm I ever went through. Yeah.
Well, we had some where we got, kids couldn't go to school, or we couldn't get to school for, like a week.
But that was a nasty one.
We had enough shelter with the barn that we could get them all in the barn eventually, but then trying to get them in the barn sometime, that was a story and a half. But
And yeah, that 64, I don't know what Howard would remember, he remembers better.
Yeah.
At least he claims he does.
Yeah.
I think it was 66, but we got, like I said, we got pictures of the cow just froze, sitting there froze. Mm-hmm. And that was...
Then in 84, we had a really bad storm, and it was sleeted so bad that I tried to go outside, but as soon as you went outside, it freeze your eyes shut. And put on goggles, and then you couldn't see through the ice right away. And so for 3 days and them storms, I never even got to the barn. And but if I would have got to the barn, there wouldn't have been anything I could have done anyway. Probably best I stayed away and not chased them out of the barn, you know. But yeah. And then I don't remember exactly what year it was, but we had a bad blizzard on the 23rd of April. And we had yearlings that drifted, and they got on the railroad tracks and they drifted about 12 miles on the railroad tracks. They would look pretty rough. Took all the hair off the back of their ears, and their rumps were bare, and some of them died, you know, and got piled up in a fence corner and froze to death. That was a terrible thing to see. You know, you remember them things.
They stick
Yeah.
out to you.
You know, old cows will kind of stick around the farmstead, but young cattle will drift quicker than old cattle. The old ones are smarter.
They've learned, they've been around a time or
Yeah.
two, natural selection.
Yeah, there's no place to go.
It was, well, it was a spring storm is what it was. And we turned out calves and cow pairs. And this hit, and it really was no warning, but it got bad. And my dad and I went out trying to find our cows and get them back home that had calved. I had a saddle horse and he had a pickup. And the first thing that kind of happened out there, we got out there and we got separated. I couldn't find him and he couldn't find me. So we kind of went about it ourselves. And when we ended up, actually we got pretty near to the gate about the same time. He had some and I had some. But it burned and hurt the face so bad. But my horse was there to help. And he was out there. You know, I was worried about my dad to begin with. And then I did hear the pickup, I remember one time, but it was that bad you couldn't see each other. That's what I can remember on that.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Right.
Agriculture is always a challenge, but that's part of the fun of it too. You know, it's not the same thing every day.
Is that what has kind of kept you going over the years, or what kept you going over the years?
Well, what kept me going is I had to feed my family.
Yeah, that's really good motivation.
Yeah, we had a large family, so we had some help with the kids.
No, we just did. And we had a real strong 4-H club out there. And we would meet on Sunday afternoon and have potluck supper. And anyway, that was a fun community thing.
I love hearing positive stories about 4-H.
She talked to our kids, they firmly believe that is the basis of their good education. They believe that they would not be what they are now without their 4-H experiences, because they loved it, and it was good, you know, and it's different than it was now. There was, 150 kids in Adams County in 4-H at one time.
That's about triple the number of kids we have right now. Yeah.
Still a very good program. I mean, it's a wonderful program, but yeah, they firmly believe that their 4-H years are, and they all went through 10 years. So yeah.
What's a favorite family tradition over the years?
We used to go to Montana fishing, fly fishing. When I was even in high school, we did that. Otherwise, then of course the holidays, relatives from 50 miles away would come. My mother was originally from Lemon, so a lot of relatives from there. And you pick a holiday, some years we'd go that way, and some years they'd come back out to our place.
How about when you went fly fishing? Why was it out in Montana? What connections did you have there?
Fast water fishing in knee-deep water that you could just barely move around in. And then to see who could do better than the other one, you know. And we enjoyed trout fishing anywhere, trout fish to begin with. And so we liked it and stayed with it.
Now, was it your dad that taught you how to fly fish?
Yes. Same way with hunting. To this day, we still deer hunt.
It just brings back those memories.
Yes, yeah.
As a child, I went with my mom hunting crocuses, and I always totally enjoyed it, so I passed that on to my children, my granddaughters, and now I've even got a great-grandson that's gone crocus hunting with me.
So how do you know that? Do you go out multiple times, or is that?
Yep, you have to go until they're there, and when they're there, it's a miracle. It's a precious, precious moment.